So today I am back with SBC's Director of Test Prep, Anthony Ritz, and we are going to dive into what you can expect on sort of an initial session with Anthony. It's the test review lesson, and it's an important part of your process with him. And people have a lot of questions about what exactly it is. So we're going to dive in and answer some of those questions. Welcome, Anthony.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. And, you're right. We get a ton of these questions, and I end up answering a lot of the same ones on calls over and over. And that's fine. I'm happy to answer all of your questions by phone. Always welcome to reach out. But we thought, maybe it'd be good to put some of these out there in the podcast, and maybe we'll even put this up as an FAQ on the website afterward as well. So.
Yeah. Okay, so let's start. What is the test review lesson and why is it useful?
Well, that's a big important question to lead off. The test review is the first lesson that we are going to do with any student who comes in for test prep. And what we're going to ask you to do is to bring in a recently completed official practice test that we can go over together. And we'll basically look at all your answers to those questions on the test. But we won't just be looking at what you got right and wrong. We'll be looking at your thought process. I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions about, why did you pick this answer? And what were you thinking here? And did you consider this choice or that? It sounds very accusatory, but I assure you that it's not judgy. It's just, I'm really trying to get to the bottom of how you think, how you solve problems, and even how you learn. And then we can use what we see there to build a plan of action for the remaining tutoring that's tailored to your needs. I think this is really important because to me, that's what the real advantage is of individual tutoring versus, a group course or a book or pre-recorded video or whatever else you might use. The advantage of individual tutoring is that it's tailored. It's that you can work with somebody who's able to get to the bottom of exactly what your needs are, exactly what is right for you, and just give you that the whole time. And the test review is what we need to do to be able to then make the rest of the tutoring engagement the best it can possibly be.
Perfect. So how long is this test review session?
Well, it's 2 hours because it will definitely take at least that long to go through a full practice test for almost every student. There may be a very few exceptions for students who are at the very high levels and have very, very few wrong answers, in which case, if we go shorter, any time we don't use, we'll bank and we'll save for a future tutoring session. But much more often, we'll struggle to even get through a whole test in the 2 hours. In those cases, sometimes it'll run a few minutes longer. There's no additional charge for that time, of course. But we'll see enough in the 2 hours. And I've done this a lot of times that I can make sure to see what I need to be able to get the evaluation. We may not see every single question you missed on the test, but we'll see a representative sample and I'll have a good understanding. And at the end of it, we'll talk about the plan ahead. And so when students come in with these questions about, well, how many hours of tutoring do I need? Or is this score realistic? I always kind of say, I don't really know. I can't really answer those questions because I don't have this information. But at the end of that test review session, we'll spend a few minutes and I will be able to answer those questions and give you a much better picture of, what goals are reasonable and what the timeline will look like for the tutoring to get there.
Perfect. So do students come to you kind of already knowing what they need to work on? And if so, can we just skip the test review?
So I do sometimes get students who kind of go, yeah, no, I just need that. And I think earlier in my career as a tutor, I was more, inclined to be like, okay, fine, let's just work on those things. And I've kind of learned the hard way, I think, that that's probably a mistake. Because students aren't always great self-assessors about that stuff. Students think they know what their problem is, but first of all, they may just be wrong about what they're missing. And a lot of times, if you are really bad at a certain area, you won't even recognize when it's coming up in a question. You won't even realize that's what you're missing on the test. And so I found that, a lot of times the test review will surface issues students didn't know they had. If had the great self-assessment to be fully aware of everything, you probably wouldn't need the tutor. And then second of all, even if you can speak in a broad way about what you're missing, there's a lot of different reasons you might be missing those questions. If it's algebra question, there's a ton of different things that could go into that. Maybe you're making careless errors. Maybe you don't know a certain algebraic rule. Maybe you're not recognizing a special quadratic. Whatever else. Maybe you're struggling reading and interpreting the problems and it's more of a word problem issue. So the test review will still help us get really valuable insights that I don't think we can get any other way. And so we generally will want pretty much every student to start with that, even if they think they might have some sense of what their sort of weak areas already are.
Okay, so you're asking them to actually complete a practice test before the session. What if I'm just starting my prep? I don't know anything about the exam. I've never seen it, and I just don't feel ready to take that practice test.
So that's very understandable. We do get students coming in really raw. They're like, I heard I need to take the GMAT or the GRE. I have no idea what that is. And in those cases, I always tell students, like, it's okay if you want to spend a week or maybe two, get the official guide for that test. And both official guides for the GMAT and GRE have pretty good general, like, math review and everything. You can go through that and familiarize yourself with the different question types, and just get your bearings a little bit before taking the test. But what is important, what we don't want, is we don't want to have this turn into this sort of never-ending doom loop of, you don't feel ready to take the practice test, so you don't do the review session, so you don't know really what to work on, so you just kind of float around in the book and you kind of look at everything, but you're not really sure what you should be doing, and so then you don't ever feel ready, so you don't take the practice test, and it just loops around and around. So it's really important that you set a firm deadline, give yourself a week, maybe two, but then ready or not, take the practice test and understand I have done this a long time. I can adjust for what I'm seeing, and I can tell the difference between somebody who's bringing me a practice test and their problem is, you know, they're rusty, they lack exposure, versus somebody whose problem is, no, they've seen the stuff, but they're just really struggling to kind of do it, even though they're familiar with it. So even if you're taking it relatively cold with only maybe like that week or so of sort of general familiarizing, it's okay to take the test. It's okay to bring that to me, and I'll still be able to figure out what I need to make sure that our path forward is a good one.
Yeah, I mean, you really, I've seen so many times you just have that expertise and you get it. So, okay, where are they going to get the practice test? Are you giving them the practice test? You send it to them?
Great question. And no, I won't be sending it to you. I won't be giving it to you during the session. I will ask that you get it yourself before you come in and you take the test. Shortly before the session. So let me actually show you where to get the practice tests. If you don't mind, I will screen share briefly, and I will show you the official sites for both GRE and GMAT.
And for people listening on
I will
audio,
also,
yeah,
yes,
we'll just kind of walk through what Anthony is doing on the screen.
yes, I will explain exactly what I'm doing. So the official site for the GMAT is mba.com, which I have pulled up here. And for the GRE, it is ets.org. If you go to mba.com, you have information about the GMAT exam. And up at the top, you have a little button that says GMAT Prep. If you click on that button, it's actually very easy. It takes you directly here. And they put the free practice test front and center. Very nice of them. Practice test 1 and 2 in the free starter kit. You can download that. It's got 2 practice tests right in it. You go further down, and you will see that there are 4 more practice tests, 3, 4, 5, and 6, available for purchase. I do recommend purchasing them all. It is a little bit of a discount if you buy them together. It's well worth it. And by the way, tests 3 through 6, not the 2 free ones, but the paid tests 3 through 6 can each be reset one time with guaranteed no repeated questions. So effectively, there are 10 full practice tests here. Don't go burning through all of them or anything. They're valuable and they're limited. So just take the one, But, take one of these free ones if you haven't already, or if you have, you can take one of the paid ones that you haven't done. For the GRE, ets.org. And we're going to click this little three lines in the top left corner. We're going to get assessment products. And under assessment products, you will have the GRE general test, which takes you to ets.org/GRE. And I suppose you could go there directly if you prefer. Test and official GRE prep. And you can shop official GRE prep would be the next button to click. A few more clicks on this site. They don't make it quite as easy for you. But from there, you can go to the practice tests, and you will see three paid practice tests. Power Prep Plus numbers 1, 2, and 3 for the lovely price of $45 a pop as of this recording. But what they don't want you to see as much, and they don't make as obvious, if you scroll all the way to the bottom and then all the way to the right, they really kind of hide it here. But there are also two free practice tests, one of which is Power Prep 1, untimed, free, unscored practice test. By the way, the nice people of Reddit have put together a scoring guide for this test. So even though it is given as untimed and unscored, you can self-time and use Reddit to self-score it. And then Power Prep 2, which is timed. A lot of students get this confused because I think they want you to, because the tests are numbered 1, 2, 3, 1, and 2, which is a terrible numbering system. I'm not sure why they didn't just call them 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. But yes, indeed, Power Prep Plus 1, 2, and 3, Power Prep 1 and 2. And
So
again,
there
they're
you
well worth
have
it.
it. The makers of the GRE do not know how to number.
Yeah, they aren't so good at counting to five. Or maybe they just would prefer that you pay for a test, then notice that there are free ones down at the bottom. That might be a more likely explanation.
Yeah. Okay.
Uh, but there you go. That's how you get the tests, and you will go online before our session, and you will take one of those, and that's what we will review.
Fabulous. Okay, so those are, I guess, official tests. What exactly does that mean? And if someone goes to, say, Kaplan, can they just get one of those tests, a Kaplan test?
Well, the official tests are made by the people who write the real test, and I strongly would recommend that if you have any official test still available, if you haven't already somehow done them all, and maybe we'll talk about that in a minute, but if you haven't done them all, then I would strongly prefer an official test to a company test because there are subtle differences. A Kaplan test, a Princeton test is not official. It's not written by the people who make the real thing. And no matter how much any company tries, any company, there are going to be subtle differences. There's going to be ways where it's not quite exactly perfect as a replica of what the real test is. No company can match the development budgets of the actual testing companies, which I've heard through the grapevine, they're spending a four-digit number in development dollars per question. So
My gosh,
no
per
test prep
question.
company. Sorry,
Okay.
was that?
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, so what if you have already done all of the official tests? What are you
Well,
left with?
in that case, I will grudgingly look at one of the company tests. I would recommend trying to get one of the relatively better companies there. I think Manhattan has pretty good practice tests. I think Magoosh has some pretty decent practice tests. So, they're not as good as the real thing, but they're the next best thing. If you're coming to us having already done all of the official tests and not recently enough for us to use one of them, then that would be what we would probably need to do.
And what if I've done the company tests? I'm
Oh
very
God.
eager.
Well, I am sorry to hear that. I certainly would not recommend that anyone be in a position that they've done all the official and all the company tests. But in that unfortunate circumstance, we will be forced to look at one of your most recent practice tests, assuming that it's even somewhat recent. Um, I don't really like the idea of resetting and redoing tests because it can really bias you to see repeated questions, things that you even in the back of your mind, even unconsciously, you've read that passage before at some point, you studied that vocabulary before at some point. It just really throws things off. So, ideally, we want to have a recent and official test, but as we exhaust that possibility, we'll take what we can get and we'll make the best of it. And generally, we can still do a pretty decent job of sort of figuring things out that way.
Okay. Um, so the next question I have is one, I mean, we get this all the time. GMAT versus GRE, how do I know which test to tackle? Um, which one should I take? How do I decide?
That's a great question and a very complex one that probably is the subject of its very own podcast episode at some point. But, you know, for the purposes of the test review, if you're not sure, what I would say is it's perfectly fine to take a practice test of each type and bring them both into the session. Let me know, hey, this is something that I was debating, and can we kind of look at both? And of course, we won't be able to look in their entirety at both tests. I've already said we probably won't even be able to look in quite the entirety of one test. But, we'll be able to look at a little bit of each, and I'll be able to help you make the assessment that will lead to which is the better test. And by the way, that assessment is not which test is easier or feels easier for you. It's really where are you better suited to the question types to beat the curve because they are both curve tests. So, even if a question is easier for you, if it's easier for everyone, that doesn't help. So we can sit down, we can look through the tests together. Again, if you take one of each, and we can sort of figure out, where is the skill set that you have especially suited to the sort of different types of questions on GMAT versus GRE. And that can be a part of the test review session at the end of it. I can probably give you some pretty good guidance about where you're ultimately in a position to end up scoring better.
Okay. Now, what if I've taken the test? I've taken an actual test, didn't do well, so then decide to come to you for tutoring. Can we just review that score report?
So the official tests don't release their questions because they want to reuse their questions. And obviously, if you've seen the score report, you know that the actual questions you saw aren't on there. And because of what we're really trying to look for in the test review session, it's not actually all that helpful to just review a score report. A lot of times the categories on score reports are borderline mysterious. The identify stated idea versus identify implied idea for different types of reading comprehension questions. Kind of like, what? Even as a tutor, I'm not really sure where they're drawing that line and what it means. And so for what we need to get out of this session, it's not actually going to be helpful to review the scoreboard. You're welcome to share the score. I'll want to know what that is, but we'll still ask that you take a practice test.
Okay, so fine, fine, fine. I'm taking a real official practice test. Um, do I send the result to you beforehand? Do you review it all in advance of our lesson?
No, actually, I mean, if you want to show me your score, that's fine and good, but I'm not going to spend a bunch of time going through your test with a fine-tooth comb before we meet, and not only because I'm working with other students or terribly lazy or whatever else, mostly though, because the thing that I'm really interested in is not what you got right and wrong, but I'll say it again, it's the thought process behind it, and you could get the same wrong answer in half a dozen different ways. So what I really need to know is not, okay, what did you miss? It's okay, why did you miss that? And the only way I'm going to find that out is by sitting down in a call like this one and talking to you. So it's fine if you don't share the score or the result beforehand. All you need to do is bring it in to the test review session at our appointed time and screen share and we will look at it together and I'll ask you those questions and that's how we'll get what we need.
Okay, and then should I review my test and the correct solutions before we meet, or I'm just taking it and we meet?
So it's maybe a surprise to a lot of students, but it's probably better if you don't review it too much before we meet after you take it, because what sometimes will happen is that students will take the test and then they'll review it. They'll go on GMAT Club or GRE Club. They'll go in the forums. They'll look up the solutions. And then when we get into the test review session, I start asking them these questions about, what they do, and they start going, okay, well, I know what I'm supposed to do because I looked it up. And I ask, okay, that's great, but what did you do? What were you thinking? They're kind of at a loss. They kind of don't, they're like, oh man, it's kind of fuzzy now. It's kind of muddied by these other solutions I've seen. And it makes it, I think, harder to get at what they were just thinking at the time, as opposed to having that filtered through their understanding of what the solution is supposed to be. So, take the test, take it, relatively close to the session, and then, we'll look at it. But ideally, you don't really do too much else with it in between.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Um, so you said take it relatively close to the session. Can I take it a month before, a week before? What do you recommend?
So the question that I'm going to respond with, I'm going to answer your question with a question is, how far in advance can you take it and remember what you were thinking? Now, I would say to be safe, a day or two in advance is ideal. I think pretty much everyone, if you took the test yesterday, you look back at the question, you're going to go, oh, yeah, this is what I did there. Oh, yeah, this is what I was thinking. And frankly, if you don't remember it a day later, that probably also tells me something important. A couple days, probably fine. For some people, maybe a week before you still remember it, but for some people, you may already not. If we're getting to a month before, you probably don't. I bet you don't remember, what you were thinking in a particular moment a month ago, probably almost any particular moment a month ago. And, if you're getting longer than that, it just gets non-viable. So the strong preference here is that it be, a couple days to maybe a week on the longer end, but ideally, pretty close to the session.
Okay. Um, so that makes me think that I should schedule the review with you before I go ahead and take the test. But
Absolutely.
what? Okay.
That's very, very important. Sometimes students do call me up and say, "Hey, I took a practice test. When can we schedule the review?" And it's like, "Oh, gee, you called me during busy season. I'm booked for the next 5 days." And they're like, "Oh, but wait, this weekend I go out of town for the next week. If we can't schedule the next 5 days, I'm going to be gone for a week after." And it's like, "Oh, so we're going to look at this test in 2 weeks? Wait, shoot, it's no good. You're going to forget it. Got to do it all over." So I strongly recommend if you're thinking about doing a test review session, give us a call, set it up, put something on the calendar, and then once you know when that session is on the calendar, you can take that test shortly before the session and make sure that we're not wasting any effort.
I mean, this makes so much sense. I think this is such an ideal way to start off a test prep process, and I've seen you do it with our clients and also people that I know personally. So let's get into logistics. Where do I sign up? How do I pay? What's it going to cost me? Give me the tiny details here.
Well, this part is actually very, very simple. The Stacy Blackman test prep page is stacyblackman.com/test prep. And for those of you who are watching this as opposed to listening, I will briefly screen share that page. So you come right here, stacyblackman.com/test prep. You scroll straight down, and the very first thing you will see under Choose a Package is the trial test review package for the introductory rate. We actually price this slightly lower than our individual hours. We don't want anyone to feel like we're gouging you in that first session. We want to give you the opportunity to make a fairly small commitment at first and make sure that you feel comfortable. So it is $600 for the 2 hour session. So 300 per hour, but again, it is priced as a package because it will definitely take 2 hours to go through the test. And all you got to do to pay for it is click add to cart, and you'll get this lovely pop-up right here. You can pay right here. And once you do that, we will rapidly reach out to you and say, hey, I see you signed up for the test review session, and we'd love to get a little more information about what your situation is and get you set up for a time for that. Of course, you can also call us first and have that conversation. And then after you've had that conversation, you can come right back to this page and click on the add to cart button. You can do those two things in either order, but either way, you will have a lovely little call with me, and you will have a lovely little click on this button. And once those two things are done, you'll be getting a lovely little Zoom invite for us to go through the test review.
And, you're going to get value out of this session, whether a client proceeds with you or not. It's just such a helpful way to go through a test, identify how you're doing, why. Like it's really a great tool. And I want to say I've seen personally how really ethical you are and how much you really care about your students. Like I've seen Anthony say to someone, you know what, you don't need me. You've pretty much nailed this. I've seen him say it's going to be very, very borderline impossible, difficult for you to achieve a certain score based on what I'm seeing. So, like, this is not a sales funnel. This is a real exercise for Anthony to understand a student's needs and abilities and to really provide value up front. So, um, I guess my final question is if you sign up on the SBC website for test prep, does everyone get Anthony?
Well, that's a great question, and I'll tell you this. Right now, first of all, I am the guy, and I'm the only person doing this for SBC, but we are also training somebody, and at some point we may have more people. So what I'll tell you is there will be no bait and switches here. You will speak with the person you're working with, which at this point is me. Before the test review, you will feel comfortable with that person and their credentials, and anyone who works with SBC is going to be absolutely top notch. And if you're not happy with them, we'll get you somebody else. But again, if you speak with me in the initial call and we discuss the test review, then I am the one who you'll be working with for that test review and throughout your tutoring. And I will not be passing you off to anyone that is not what you signed up for at any point.
And you're the best. You are the
Oh,
best. That's why we
thank you.
reeled you in and we got you on our team as director of test prep. So,
I
um,
appreciate that.
yeah.
I do want to say one thing about what you said about, not working with students in some cases. And that's true. And I think what's really important to me is I'm not trying in the short term to maximize, dollars that I can make off of somebody. I decided a long time ago in my tutoring career I'm trying to maximize basically the reviews that I get, the Yelp reviews, the wherever else reviews. And if in the long run, if I have happy students, if I have students who I'm able to help and make a difference with them, and they go tell their friends and they go write about it online, I'm going to make a lot more money, and SBC is going to make a lot more money through the word of mouth and the chain of referrals of a friend of a friend of a friend of years down the road. And so for me, that's the mindset here is I want to help the people I can help. And if I am not the right fit for somebody, I don't want to work with them because if I'm working with somebody it's not the right fit, they're going to be an unhappy customer. And I'd rather at that point that they go somewhere else and find the right fit for them. So if you talk to me, I'll do everything I can to figure out if I can be the right fit for you. And I'm able to be the right fit for a lot of people. And if that's a good fit for both of us, then I will do everything in my power to help you get the score of your dreams.
Amazing. We're so happy to have you on the SBC team and appreciate your time today and all the real thoughtfulness you put into your work with every single client. So I encourage anyone who is looking for one-on-one prep, which is an investment, but I think a worthwhile investment to reach out and chat with Anthony. StacyBlackman.com/test prep. So thank you, Anthony, and we'll sign off.
Thanks so much, Stacy. I always enjoy coming on the podcast. Thank you.